Hello, students, and welcome to yet another ENG 1105 Introduction to the Use of English lecture. In this session, we will focus on the skill of identifying main and supporting details in written text. Before we get into it, consider this. If you read a really good novel or you watched a really captivating movie, how would you promote that movie for your friends? What details would you share with them? You'd very likely share the high points of the plot so that they would be engaged and also want to watch that movie or read that book. When you are asked about what happened during your day, what experiences do you automatically think about? Most likely you think about the main events of the day, and you don't always think about the smaller things that happened, such as the amount of times you checked your watch or the amount of times you sanitized your hand during the day. And so this means that our brains already know how to identify main details and supporting details. But we're going to take a closer look at this, especially for an academic context. And so our objectives for this session are first, to understand the purpose of being able to differentiate between main and supporting details in writing. We also want to discuss the difference between main points and supporting details. And finally, we want to explore a few techniques that you can use to help to identify the main points in longer pieces of writing. Now, before we go any further, let me just remind you what a main idea is. The main idea is the author's central message on the topic, and it is often expressed directly, and so it can be written plainly there in the text in a sentence or two, and I'll tell you where to find that, or it can be implied. So if you read the entire piece of text comprehensively, you will be able to conclude on what the writer's central message is if it isn't written there for you explicitly. Now, let's quickly talk about the purpose of having this skill. So why do we need this skill as students? First, your lecturers may test this skill to determine how well you understand class material. And so if your lecturer hands you a 20-page handout and they want to know if you've read it and if you understand the concepts there, they may ask you to write a 1-page where you list all of the main points of that 20-page handout. And so it's important that you know how to find the main points in that longer piece of writing. It enables you to condense large amounts of material for study and research. And this happens to be a very important purpose for having this skill. And so from time to time, when you're studying for finals or midterms, you might find that you have a lot of handouts that you need to go through. If you're able to quickly identify the main points in those handouts and create your study cards, you can be a lot more efficient in your study process. Additionally, when doing research, you may need to access secondary sources. This could come from journals and textbooks and research papers that were done by others. And you want to find the main points very quickly so that you can keep the process going. Knowing how to find those key points and where to look for them is very, very important. And so we hope that this presentation will help you to search in the right places for those main points and also to be able to recognize the supporting details. Finally, it helps the reader to be better at concisely conveying the meaning of a text to someone who probably hasn't read it as yet. And so this is a useful skill both in an academic context and also in a professional context. So if you have to give a brief synopsis of a longer report, for example, you should be able to do that very quickly by knowing where to look for the main points of that report. Distinguishing between main and supporting details. Let's first look at the main points. How do we know that something is a main point? The main points are central messages, as we established before. So the main point is the central message of the writer. Main points can also be the main arguments or assertions that are used to support the thesis. And we're going to talk about the thesis statement in a little while. And so you can look for main arguments or main assertions. You can try to identify the central message. And you should note that the main point usually contains the position that the writer takes for or against, for example. Supporting points, on the other hand, are the examples and illustrations that promote the main ideas or assertions. They present details, facts, and statistics that prove the points made by the writer. Okay, so your main points then are the central messages. Your supporting points or your supporting details help to ensure that the message comes across clearly, that the message is well illustrated, that the point is proven. Techniques for identifying main and supporting points. I'm going to share with you 3 techniques for doing this. Here's the first one. Technique number 1. Find the thesis statement. The thesis statement declares the main point or controlling idea of your entire essay. It answers these questions. What is the subject? What are the writer's opinions on the subject? What is the writer's purpose in this essay? Just by reading the thesis statement, which may be presented in 1 or 2 sentences, you can answer these questions once it's a really good thesis statement. You should be able to say what the topic is, what the subject is, what the writer's opinion is the writer for or against, or what the writer's purpose is in writing this essay. Is the writer an advocate, or is the writer trying to share information? The thesis statement is usually found at the beginning of the essay, particularly in the introduction. So find the first paragraph, that's your introductory paragraph, and in that paragraph, you should be able to find the thesis statement. Many writers choose to put their thesis statement closer to the end of the introduction. Some believe that when you do that, you create a great launching pad for what comes next in the body of the essay, where the writer handles the main arguments. And so let's look at an example of an introduction with the thesis statement at the end. It says there, although they were invented almost 100 years ago, for decades, cars were only owned by the rich. Since the 60s and 70s, they have become increasingly affordable, and now most families in developed nations and a growing number in developing countries own a car. Here's our thesis statement. While cars have undoubted advantages, of which their convenience is the most apparent, they have significant drawbacks, most notably pollution and traffic problems. Now, if I were to ask you what this writer is going to talk about, I'm sure that you will be able to at least point out that the writer is going to focus on the fact that cars tend to cause pollution and traffic problems. You should be able to identify at least those 2 disadvantages. You will notice as well that the writer focuses on an advantage. This here is the writer's promise. The writer promises us that in this essay, we can find points on the advantage, which is their convenience, and the disadvantages, which are pollution and traffic problems. Now let's take a closer look at what the writer does here to see if he keeps his promise. In a short essay, most body paragraphs contain one of the main points of the discussion, expressed in a topic sentence. And so now we're focusing on the body of the essay. The essay usually has an introduction, a body where the main arguments are presented and supported, and then you have the conclusion. We are going to focus a bit on the body paragraphs. In the body paragraphs, you should find a topic sentence for each one of those body paragraphs. This topic sentence is based on one of the main claims of the thesis. And so our second technique is to identify the topic sentences. Note here again that the writer in the thesis statement identified pollution as a disadvantage and traffic problems as a disadvantage. Now let's look at one of the body paragraphs to see if he does keep his promise to share with us information on one of these points. And so the point that is illustrated here, the main point that is illustrated, is the point on pollution. Here's what the topic sentence says. Despite this advantage, the writer spoke about the advantage in the preceding paragraph, cars have many significant disadvantages, the most important of which is the pollution they cause. Notice there that if you're just skimming across this, let's say you had to read in a rush, or you're doing your first reading of this piece of writing, you already know what this paragraph is going to be about because the writer has given us a topic sentence. Notice too that this topic sentence correlates with some information that was provided in the thesis statement. Now let's look at the supporting information. In the supporting sentences, we notice that the writer says, almost all cars run either on petrol or diesel fuel. He states a fact, both of which are fossil fuels. Burning these fuels causes the car to emit serious pollutants such as carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrous oxide. Not only are these gases harmful for health, causing respiratory disease and other illnesses, they also contribute to global warming, an increasing problem in the modern world. According to the Union of Concerned Scientists, transportation in the US accounts for 30% of all carbon dioxide production in that country, with 60% of these emissions coming from cars and small trucks. What does the writer do here? In the supporting sentences, the writer presents you with scientific information in order to support the point that is made in the topic sentence. That is what supporting sentences are supposed to do. They add a lot of content. They add a lot of proof to help to make your topic sentence or your main idea, your thesis statement, more valid. And when you look at the last sentence of this paragraph, you will notice that it says there, in short, pollution is a major drawback of cars. And this will lead us to our third technique. The third technique is to find the concluding sentence. You found the topic sentence, you found the supporting information. Now look at the concluding sentence. And I want you to compare the concluding sentence with the topic sentence. It says on the screen, the concluding sentence of a paragraph usually echoes the point made by the topic sentence. I like to say that a paragraph comes full circle. In fact, so does an essay, but we'll talk about that later. So the paragraph comes full circle. It begins at the point where it talks about pollution, and it ends at the same point where it says that pollution is one of the greatest advantages of having cars in our environment. So if you were not too clear on the topic sentence, you can look for a concluding sentence, which many writers use, and you can compare them to see if the point is definitely the same. Bear in mind these things. As we wrap up this presentation for now, I want you to remember that the main idea can be found in the thesis. The thesis gives you the overarching idea that controls the entire essay. However, a writer always presents main arguments in the body of their writing, or main assertions in the body of their writing. And we'll also consider these as main ideas. In order to locate those, you will search for topic sentences. Once you've found those topic sentences, you will find that the sentences that follow them, the supporting sentences, do just that. They support that main idea. In order to confirm that you found the main idea, you can look at the concluding sentence. And I've created a little flow chart here to share with you, again, the process. So the first thing that you will do is find a thesis. You've picked up an essay. It's about 500 to 1,000 words long. And you want to know what this essay is really about. First, try to locate the thesis statement. Look in the introduction to see what the thesis statement is. You can be guided by perhaps the title of the writing. And then you try to find the specific statement in the introduction that tells you exactly what direction this piece of writing is going to go in. Next, you will move into the body of the writing where you have multiple paragraphs. Very likely in each one of those paragraphs, you should be able to find a topic sentence. However, in longer pieces of writing, let's say it exceeds 1,000 words or so, you may find that the writer doesn't always stick to this here. So you have to read very carefully to ensure that what you are identifying is indeed a main point. And you can always compare it to the thesis statement to see if that is a main point that is being made, or if it is just a paragraph that presents you with supporting information. In order to double check with yourself, you can look at concluding sentences and compare them to your topic sentence. I hope that this is clear and that it has helped in some way to enlighten you on the process that you can use for identifying your main ideas and distinguishing them from your supporting ideas. I want to thank you for listening to the presentation all the way down to the end, and I hope that you will fully participate in all of the activities that will follow in your tutorial sessions. If you'd like to have more information on anything that was shared here today, you can check out these resources, and I hope that it will continue to clarify any questions that you have on the topic. Feel free to come to the webinars with your questions as well so that we can bring some clarity to all of this for you. Take care and have a pleasant rest of the day.